Good evening, everyone. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College and the Paying for College 101 group. Thanks for showing up tonight. And we have a special great guest tonight, Jeff Selingo. We have to thank Jeff, and maybe he'll explain a little bit. He's had a long day and he had some travel issues. But he was still able to make it tonight. So we really appreciate all his efforts. And so tonight's a really important topic. We are going to talk about higher ed, all the transitions that are happening. Love to hear Jeff's perspective, and he's bringing some interesting slides. He also has a book that's coming out very soon, September 9th, right, Jeff?
September 9th, yes.
Okay. Oh, and you have a copy of it.
And it's a little bit blocked out here because of that.
Yeah. So it's called Dream School. And some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight are from Jeff's book. And Jeff very nicely gave me a copy in advance, and it is very, very worthwhile reading. I'm actually going to show, I have his previous book called Who Gets In and Why, which is also still a very worthwhile book to read. Was it from?
2020, 5 years, actually 5 years ago, September.
Amazing. Gosh, wow. 5 years goes by fast. And you might think it's like it's dated, but it's even though a lot of things have changed, it is still very worthwhile to read it because it's from the perspective of being in the admissions office to really understand all the conversations. But let me just do a little bit of housekeeping before I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to get started with slides. This is officially a Zoom meeting. I always kind of emphasize that and say that because you can unmute yourself, but unless you have a pressing question, we'd ask that you don't unmute yourself just because we'll hear a lot of background noise. This is recorded. We'll send the link tomorrow to the recording. And feel free to put questions in chat. We definitely set aside time at the end of the slides and the discussion to answer lots of questions, and we love to hear those questions. So one of my quick questions just to get things started is if people can put in the chat where you're watching from and what year, if you have a student in high school or maybe you have a student in college, kind of share with us what stage that student is in. And if you have a rising senior, kind of where you are in the college search process. So just you can put that into chat. Jeff, I'll give you a little bit of a background, and then I'll pass it to you to get started and share your slides. And for those of you who aren't familiar who Jeff is, and I'm sure a lot of people are, he's spent more than 2 decades reporting on colleges and universities. He has a book that we just showed, the Who Gets In and Why, and Dream School is coming out very soon. He's also a regular contributor to a lot of places, but the ones I'll just mention that are well known or media organizations like The Atlantic and the New York Times. So Jeff, I will pass it to you to get started, and then we'll discuss things after you can kind of set the framework for everyone.
Great. Well, first of all, Debbie, thank you so much for having me on. You referenced a lot of travel issues today. I was trying to get from New York to DC, and who knew it would take half the day to do that. And to be honest with you, I'm still not all the way back in DC, so I'm not in my usual place here. But this is such an important group to me, the Road to College community, the Paying for College Facebook group, 101 Facebook group, which I love. I've gotten so much out of it myself, as much as I hope I have contributed to it as well. It's a great community, and I'm really appreciative of not only everybody in the community and everybody here tonight, but Debbie, for your work as well and the Road to College team that you put together, just giving people the information that they need, and hopefully we will further that tonight in our conversation. So when Debbie and I talked about this webinar a couple of months ago, we were talking about all that's going on in higher ed and all the headlines, and I know that it can be pretty confusing if you have a high school student, if you have an undergraduate, or maybe you have graduate students, like what is happening and how is it going to impact us, right? A lot of policy around higher ed, whether it's at the state or federal level, and particularly now what's happening at the federal level, I know can be a little bit esoteric. It can be a little bit like, well, what does that mean for me? And that's what we're going to hopefully do tonight. So I'm going to share. What we're going to do is I'm going to share about 10 minutes to 11 minutes of slides to kind of set the scene for tonight, and then we'll go into a discussion with Debbie and also take your questions throughout. So let me first share these slides. And there we go. So tonight we're really going to talk about what you need to know about what's happening here in higher ed. I have this image of a very curvy, hilly road because that is exactly what we're on right now. But first, I do want to tell you a little bit about the book. As Debbie mentioned, Dream School, which is a follow-up and a companion to Who Gets In and Why, goes on sale September 9th. If you read Who Gets In and Why, this is a perfect second book to that, even if you didn't read it. It's a book that is meant to give parents permission to think more broadly about what signals a good college, and then the tools to discover their dream school. The idea behind Dream School is that it's not a single school, it's not a single name, it's not a single type of school. It's not the SEC or the Big Ten or Ivy League. It's meant to broaden your look, and we give you the tools to help you find those dream schools. It's still a couple weeks away, but if you pre-order now, and then this will be the end of my commercial for this evening, but if you pre-order now and go to my website, jeffselingo.com/dreamschool, and you record your proof of purchase there, it's a very easy form to fill out, you will get access to a lot of goodies we're giving away, including this downloadable guide, which you'll only get during this pre-sale period, which will allow you to put the lessons of the book to work right now. We're also going to have another great webinar. We've had a couple already exclusive, but you'll get access to those, as well as some other goodies we're giving away. So pre-orders are really important to authors. That's why we really talk about them a lot. But we're also giving you things that you won't be able to get once the book goes on sale September 9th. So with that, I want to talk about a couple of the big issues that you've probably been hearing. If you're in part of the Paying for College 101 Facebook group, if you're getting the Road to College emails, if you're part of these different groups, you're probably hearing a couple of big issues over and over again. And the first one you're probably hearing about is the enrollment cliff, the demographic cliff. And what it means is that the class of 2025, the high school graduating class of 2025, which of course is the class that is going to college this fall, that starts now, any day now, any week now, was the largest graduating class and will be the largest graduating class for quite some time in the US. And in fact, we're now going to, as you can see on the chart on the left, we're going to see a downturn through next decade, a little bump up there in the early 2030s. But what's important here is that we will not be at the height of this high school graduating class for the foreseeable future. And why is that? I have a rising sophomore in high school and a rising eighth grader. They are the class of 2028 and 2030. They were born during the Great Recession when fewer people had kids. That never kind of picked back up. And then, of course, we had COVID. And so all of those are the kids and the students that will be coming through college. And so one question I get is, well, I guess it'll be easier to get in. And that is it's a double-sided coin there a little bit. It will be easier to get into places that are already easy to get in. But if you think, well, those places that have acceptance rates in the single digits where they reject 90% of students, the Ivy Plus, highly selective colleges and universities, they're already getting 3-4 times the amount of applications. So here's just one data point to put that in perspective. When I graduated high school in 1991, those colleges had about a third of the applications that they had today. Third of applications that they had today. Their acceptance rate was a lot higher than it is today, but it's not that much higher. In other words, it was 25% back then as opposed to 8%, 7, 6, 5% today. So even if they slashed the number of applications to those institutions because there are fewer students, you're still talking about an acceptance rate that is only 20-25%. And remember, it's not that because there are fewer students, today applying to college, but it's the same number of students just applying to more colleges. And so the fact is that many of these students will continue to apply to these highly selective colleges. What I think is going to be more likely, and this is of course a subject that is on Paying for College 101 all the time, is merit aid, and the chase for merit aid. So what's going to happen is fewer students graduating from high school. That means fewer students going on to college. And indeed, not only are the number of high school graduates dropping, but so is the percentage of high school graduates who go right on to college. That's been dropping for the last couple of years. So not only are the raw numbers of total graduates dropping, but so are those students who decide to go on to college from high school graduation. That means there's just going to be a lot more competition for students. When there's a lot more competition for students, that means parents and families win by getting more merit aid. And so as you think about putting together your college list, if you broaden that list and think about more than just those highly selective schools, where I think the demographic cliff is going to make a difference is around easier access to merit aid, because there's going to be a lot more competition for those students going forward.
So
I've been
Jeff,
getting, go ahead. Yes.
can
Yes.
I ask you a question about that? So in terms of, do you think that obviously there's an existing group of colleges that already give merit aid, so it sounds like they actually might increase,
They're going to have to increase, right?
how much they give, and maybe also increase in terms of the number of families they give to. That's one option. Do you also think that we'll see some schools that maybe don't give merit aid now, maybe start to?
I think you are going to, and Debbie, you read the book in advance. In Dream School, I talk about this group of what I call skip over schools. These are schools that increasingly used to be 80, 90% of their students used to be full pay. A lot of these are small liberal arts colleges, not in the top 5 or 8 or 10 liberal arts colleges, but 10 to 20, 20 to 30. Think about places like Kenyon in Ohio. Also think about Syracuse. Ron Lieber and I both had an article in recent weeks about Syracuse upping their merit aid. So you're going to see some colleges that have either spent very little or none start to get into that game because they're going to have to. So I think as you think about your college list, again, as even in my last book where I talked about those seller schools, will be fewer of them. Some of them will still not give aid, but you're going to find schools that are going to give new amounts of aid. By the way, this is the other question that I hear on the demographic changes. This was something that most colleges didn't worry about before January, but you probably have been seeing the news lately. There's expectations that there may be 150,000 fewer international students coming to the U.S. This fall. A lot of this impact is on the graduate level. As you can see here, undergraduates before COVID international undergraduates used to outnumber international graduate students before COVID. That flipped post-COVID. We had a lot more international graduate students come in to the U.S., but that's still important for undergraduates, by the way, because they fill the labs, they fill the teaching assistant jobs, right? A lot of that still flows down to undergraduates, but there's still a couple 100,000, as you can see there, undergraduate spots for international students. What's going to happen? I think, Debbie, you just saw the result of it in the last couple of weeks. I mentioned Syracuse, for example, giving out a lot more merit aid to domestic students because they're afraid that some of those international students they accepted won't be able to get a visa. We just saw it again last week or 2 weeks ago. Duke University reopened its wait list, took 50 domestic students off that wait list in late July because, again, afraid that 50 or more international students may not show up who were enrolled. So I think there's a lot is unknown right now around this. Most schools, again, the international impact is going to be at the graduate level, not necessarily as much at the undergraduate level. But what we are going to see, I think, going into this year is that once we know a little bit more about the true impact on the number of students, you might see schools open up some more spots to domestic students in the fall. Unfortunately, for applicants, no school is going to actually announce that, right? They're not going to say, oh, you can look at their international enrollment and how it's changed, but no school is going to say, oh, we're going to accept 50 or 75 or 100 more domestic students this year because of fewer international students. But you can at least look at the trends. And if you're a domestic applicant, think about where you might want to apply
So
for
can
that
I
reason.
ask one other question?
Yep.
Sorry, Jeff, on that slide. Even though it sounds like from a number of spots standpoint, it's really maybe graduate students, or graduate programs might have more availability, for U.S.
Domestic
students,
students. Yep.
right? But isn't there like a revenue impact too? If even though majority of these students are international students might go to graduate programs, if those graduate programs still aren't getting the numbers, will that revenue also impact undergraduate?
Yes, there would be, because most graduate students, especially at the less selective places, at the most selective places, most of their international students get some aid, sometimes even full aid. That's a myth that, international students are full pay everywhere. They don't necessarily are not full pay at the very selective institutions that have money to support those international students, but almost everywhere else, they are coming with real money. And as a result, these institutions will have less of it. I think most institutional leaders that I talk to think this is a short-term blip. That just like COVID stopped international flow to the US, just like the first Trump administration slowed flow to the US, they feel that this will come back next year now that there are procedures in place. But I was just in traveling internationally and talking to some U.S. Foreign Service officers. It takes, visa interviews are taking longer now.
Mm.
There's fewer Foreign Service officers to conduct those. They have to do these social media checks. There's all these things going on. The visa process is just going to take a lot longer, and we're not going to get as many international students, even if they want to come here.
So, sorry, there's a good question. Somebody's
Yeah.
asking, wouldn't the colleges replace those international students with more domestic full pay students rather than giving away merit scholarships?
Well, the fact of the matter is that, as we're going to see, there's not a lot of full pay domestic students to go around. But as you know in the book, one of the trends that I've identified is overall the pie of full pay domestic students is shrinking. And it's not because necessarily they can't pay, they don't necessarily want to pay. And
It's just
so
gotten
I
to a
think
level, right,
Right. It's
of
gotten
much.
to a level, and I'll show that in a slide in a minute. It's gotten to a level now that the net price by income has gotten so high that there are some families who say, enough is enough. I'm going to chase merit, and I'm going to go to a place that is going to discount me. So I think, again, it depends on where. And this is why, looking at those international numbers, institutions that have lost a lot of international students, they may just be more desperate to fill some of those spots, and they may be willing to dip into endowment to take less net tuition revenue in order to fill their classes. So this was the slide, Debbie, that I was just referring to. This is data that comes from Phil Levine, who's at Wellesley College. He's looking at data over the last couple of years. As you can see here, this is going back to 1996. This is looking at net tuition, public and private. The private is in the reddish, pinkish. Public is in the orangish, in celebration of Taylor Swift. We were able to get a little past her tonight, so we didn't have to compete with her tonight. But as you can see, what this is showing is that the net tuition, and those are, that's exactly what parents are paying after financial aid, has gone up at every income level. But the level that I'm looking at there is the very right side, because those are the families that historically have been the full payers. And what we're seeing now is that tuition has gone so far high. Look how the trend on those graphs, and the percentage of increase in net tuition, that increasingly those are the parents at the 200,000, 250,000 plus level who are saying, first of all, in some cases we can't anymore, right? Tuition's not 40,000 or 50,000 all in now. Now it's 70 or 80 all in at a private, 40 or 50 all in, or even 60 at a public. We just can't. And many others are just saying we don't want to.
Hmm.
because we want, and I saw this so often in the reporting from my book, Debbie, is that many of these families want to save for other students. They want to save for graduate school for their students. They want to help their students launch after college. So there's all of these things that are happening, and this is why I think that particularly among these higher income families, we're starting to see merit aid essentially go up the income scale, and a lot more colleges now start to offer some sort of merit aid package at higher family incomes than they have in the past.
And maybe Jeff, you could just address, because for some of the people here, there's always this question: do the colleges, are they looking at my finances when my student, applies and the admissions process happens?
Well, it depends on if they're need aware. If it's a need aware institution, and you could ask them that, they will look at your finances as part of their admissions review. If you remember, I had an excerpt from my last book on Road to College about how Lafayette did this. Lafayette College
Hmm.
is need aware, and at some point in the admissions process, they have a financial aid budget, and they say, I'm going to spend it on Debbie Schwartz. I'm not going to spend it on Jeff Selingo. They deny me because they don't have enough money for me. Later on in the process, though, in terms of merit aid, really how they're assigning value in merit aid, they know a lot about your demographics. They know a little bit about where you're coming from, even if they don't have your financial information at that time. Things like zip code, high school. There's all these they do a lot of scoring. They're like any other marketing company where they're trying to figure out if we give you five or ten or $15,000, are you more likely to come here? And there's about 18, depending on the school, there might be 18, 20, 25 factors that go into the scholarship value that they assign to you. And a lot of that depends on what your major. Is it a major that where they need more students or where they're more competitive? I talk about this in my new book with Case Western. Case Western for a liberal arts major, they might be willing to give more money to fill those classes because they need those students. For computer science or engineering, where they're overwhelmed with applications, they may not need to give as much money because they have enough students who want to pay
Mm.
that full price. So there are a lot of factors that go into the decision about A, whether to award merit aid, and B, whether to how much to award. So the other thing is the big beautiful bill that was passed and signed by the president around the July 4th holiday makes a lot of changes to the loan programs as well as the income driven plans as well as risk sharing. I'm going to go through all of these very quickly, but it eliminates graduate plus loans and also puts a cap on unsubsidized graduate loans. This is going to have a big impact on graduate education. Graduate plus loans were loans that you can put on top of your graduate loans, the unsubsidized graduate loans. Now there are no more plus loans at all starting next year for graduates. So there's nothing to put on top of that. You'll have to go into the private market if you need extra money after they've capped these graduate loans. And you could see for med law, you have a $200,000 limit, a $100,000 limit on everything else. And it's these lifetime limits that are going to be a problem. Medical school costs a lot more than that. These are what, again, and you don't have graduate plus loans to put on top of that. You're likely going to have to go out into the private market. The parent plus loans, another part of the program, also being capped. Both of these programs, the plus programs, have been blamed by, particularly by Republicans, for the increasing cost of college because these programs were pretty wide open. They didn't require credit scores. A lot of parents and students were able to get money for these through these programs. The thought is that as a result, the cost of college, the tuition of college, just kept going up because there was the availability of this money. And the belief is if we eliminate, cap these programs, potentially the cost of college could go down. There have been a number of income-driven programs for undergraduate loans and graduate loans over the last couple of years. This was a big push by the Biden administration. This bill consolidates all of them into one income-driven plan with new terms that are not, many people do not think are very favorable. This is a big one that kind of got lost. The House, they ended up passing really the Senate version on this. The House version was going to be much more really kind of a focus on how much colleges have. Sorry about that. This is about risk sharing on student aid. Basically, what it does is it prohibits new loans for students in programs where the payoff of those programs is not very high. In other words, they may be earning less than the median high school graduate. What does this mean? Schools are going to have to do one of two things. If they're graduates in these programs, and I will tell you, it's a lot of the fine arts, the performing arts, right? A lot of those programs do not have high ROIs. And colleges and education programs, in many cases, depending on the price. And what colleges are going to have to do, they're going to have to do one of two things. They're either going to close them down because they don't want because the students are not going to be eligible for loans, or they're going to have to lower the price for those programs in particular. So we might see one of two things, I predict, in the next couple of years. We're going to see a lot fewer of these programs that have low ROIs, the arts in particular, especially if the college is not well known for it, or the programs are not very big. And then second, what I think you might start to see is something that's been talked about a lot, Debbie, in higher ed, is differential tuition. Right
Mm,
now, at most colleges and universities, everyone pays the same price, depending on no matter your major, you might have to pay extra fees for some majors, but we might see the more popular majors cost more, less popular majors cost less. That may be part of what we're going to see. And then finally, not a direct impact, but potentially could have a direct impact. Increased endowment taxes on the wealthiest institutions for a tax on them.
so I guess to ask the question that you had at the top of the slide, do you think that those changes will impact the cost of college and start to bring it down?
Um, in the short term, no.
Right.
The cost curve of higher ed has been on a long trajectory up. It's not going to suddenly turn straight downward in the next 5 or 10 years. And I think that I think there's going to be a wait and see approach by a lot of colleges and universities. What impact is this going to have on our programs? What impact is this going to have on our enrollment? Things like that. Are students, for example, going to go into the private market to get loans? And then thus they'll still be willing to pay our tuition. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a wait and see. What is the real impact going to be? And then if there is an impact, they're either going to eliminate those programs that are problematic, or they will start to look at other ways to reduce costs. But I do not see something happening quickly overnight in terms of reducing costs.
I've actually also heard, and not specific names of colleges, but colleges starting to reach out to private lenders to make you know their own arrangements to
Yes,
provide.
you may remember, Debbie, a long, long time ago. There was a big scandal over it. A lot of colleges had preferred lenders lists.
Yep.
It was something that, geez, it might have been maybe in 2000. I think it was before the Great Recession, where they would basically get a deal for
Mm-hmm.
their students by encouraging their students to go with specific lenders. There was a big scandal at that time where some financial aid directors got kickbacks. They got
Right.
other free trips for recommending certain lenders. So there was a lot of regulations put on around that, and a lot of those lists went away as a result. I have a feeling you're right. I think those are going to come back. I think that either lenders are going to want to work with schools to get on preferred lists and offer better terms to their students. The other thing I can imagine is that a bunch of schools, especially schools that have good programs that are big, might get together and start to develop their own loan products.
Yeah.
I can imagine that happening if they have enough capital. I can imagine a whole new business line opening up around this. So I think we're
I
going
see
to
that
see
too.
some stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're going to see a lot of changes in the program. Where there's a business opportunity, someone's going to enter it.
Right.
I think people have to see what is the real impact going to be over the next couple of years. I wanted to mention online education. After COVID, where everybody went en masse into online, everybody couldn't wait to get back into person. But it's interesting, Debbie, and this is I wanted to bring up because I think this is going to be a change. As you can see from this slide now, a majority of students at the undergraduate and graduate level take at least one online class now. Obviously, that went way up during COVID and then dropped back down. But I think this is a permanent change. I think these lines, they look like they're converging. I think they'll start to flatten out. And what I see, and I'm talking to a lot of parents who have sending their kids off to college for the first time this fall, and they said, "Hey, Jeff, we got our schedule, and one of our classes is online, or it's a hybrid class." I think going back to the cost issue, I think to reduce costs, I think colleges are going to look for, even for residential students. I have an affiliation at Arizona State University. 70% of the residential students there during the course of their undergraduate career take at least one fully online class, or they take multiple hybrid classes, meaning they're in class some days, they're online other days. I think if you think my student is going to go to college, it's going to be a fully residential experience. I think particularly at bigger privates and especially at the big publics, the big public flagships, I think online as a piece of the residential experience is going to become much more the norm. So definitely expect it, because again, I think this ties back to the cost of college. I wanted to bring up research. This has been in the news a lot. Debbie, and why is that? Because I think a lot of students go into their undergraduate years thinking they may want to go onto graduate school to do research. And so obviously what's happening on the research side impacts them. The other reason is that undergraduate research is one of the biggest activities that students are going to do as undergraduates. So undergraduate research, like study abroad, like internships, they are a practice that is pretty common at a lot of colleges, that by the time you graduate, you might have a research project with a college or university, out of your college or university, with a professor. And what's happening now is we're seeing two big things happen in higher ed. One is on what's called the overhead rate. And why this is important is this is money that colleges and universities get as part of their grants. It could be 30, 40, 50, 60%. You can see it's all over the place. And that's one of the complaints by the administration, is they want to come up with a single number. Some have suggested 15%, some have suggested 20 or 30, but as you can see, some colleges are getting 60 or 70%. Why does this matter? Because if college X, which has been getting a 60% overhead rate, which means that these are dollars that go into building facilities, into electricity, into administrative work, if all those dollars are reduced, they have to come from somewhere. Where are those dollars? If that institution is going to continue to do research, those dollars have to come from somewhere, and they're going to come from somewhere else on campus. And so overall, what I think we're going to see, you might say, well, I have nothing to do with research. My kid is not going to do undergraduate research, or they're not going to go to graduate school to do research. This is going to have an impact on schools that have some sort of research portfolio, which is the majority of schools, kind of even including some of the liberal arts schools that get some research. They're just going to have fewer dollars going forward. I want to talk about artificial intelligence. I know this has been in the news a lot in the last couple of years. And, one of the big questions I get is, what should we major in given the changes in the job market? This is data that comes from the Boston Consulting Group, as well as the Burning Glass Institute. Matt Singelman and I, who's the president of the Burning Glass Institute, have done a lot of work together. They've done the Skills Disruption Index. And what this shows is that, these are very popular majors: information technology, marketing, human resources. A lot of students obviously don't major in sales, but they go into sales. This shows the percentage of jobs that are going to be disrupted. A 0 on this scale is that there will be no disruption. 100% means full disruption of that job. So 78% means that most of that job is going to be disrupted in some way. And why I think this is important, again, one of the questions that I get often is, well, what should I major in? How should I think about the job market going forward? And I think it's really hard right now because ChatGPT is coming out with new versions. It seems like every 6 months. There's no way to try to keep up with this. And so my advice to families is to think about less about the major and more about the skills that you're trying to learn. And I really talk a lot about this in the book as well. constantly be on the lookout for the jobs that you want from college. And this is a case where you're going to learn a lot of this on the internship as well. What are the skills that they're asking for in the job ad? I would start my freshman, sophomore year in college if you kind of know what you want to major in, kind of what kind of career you want, what kind of job you want. Start looking at those job ads. What are the skills that you see over and over again? What are the skills that you see people get on, if you're looking at their LinkedIn profile, for example? Those are the skills that you want to lean into a little bit more with your major to make sure that you have some sort of, that you're somewhat protected from AI. There's not full protection here. There's no way to have full protection. And again, we don't know what the world is going to look like in 4 years, and we definitely don't even know what it's going to look like in 1 year. But the advice I would encourage people to have tonight, or give people tonight, is not to rely just on your major. Oh, I'm going to major in computer science. You probably have seen the headlines in recent days of computer science majors who couldn't get jobs. They're working at Chipotle now, right? So, So don't think about a major necessarily. Think about a major combined with skills.
So do you think it's even more important that students think about like majors and, one or two minors to kind of add those extra skills that you're talking about?
I definitely think minors. I would also think about certificates. I talk in the book about a couple of colleges, Denison University being a great example of this, where during the breaks, particularly winter break, they help students take courses that are going to give them other sorts of certificates, other sorts of badges, other sorts of micro credentials to help them think. So think of a history major who gets a credential in data visualization, things like that, right? Or a marketing major that gets experience with data analytics, right? So combining not necessarily just minors, but combining those skill sets, and those are things I think you should be even looking for during the college search. Like, how do they go above and beyond the major? So the last piece I want to talk about here is something I wrote about in my newsletter a couple of weeks ago, is what I'm calling the academic infrastructure. You probably have seen the New York Times had a piece just a couple of days ago about a number of colleges that have been cutting majors. So this is a fascinating slide to me. What this shows, and I'm going to exaggerate the number here, is that 90% essentially of students major in like 10% of the majors on most campuses. As you're going on tours, everybody always highlights, oh, we have 100 majors, we have 150 majors, we have 175 majors. They love to talk about the breadth of those majors. There's not a lot of depth in most of those majors. In other words, the most popular majors take up most of the students on campus. You could see at small private baccalaureate institutions, those are example, like for the liberal arts colleges, 66% on average of students are in the top 10 programs. 34% are spread out over the rest of the majors. And why is that important? You want to know, is your major going to survive? Small majors don't always survive. There's a couple of caveats. Sometimes small majors are really well known. I'm going to give an example here. Musical theater. Musical theater at some colleges is one of their most famous majors. It might be their most well-known major, especially if they're big in the performing arts. At many colleges, those are small programs because they're very expensive to run. Just because it's small doesn't mean they'll necessarily get rid of it. Other majors that help the core curriculum. So I'm thinking of like history and English and even some languages might survive because they are providing courses to students who are taking the core curriculum. So those majors would also survive. But you definitely want to ask, how many students do you graduate every year in this major? You want to start comparing the colleges that are on your list. Is my major only 10 students a year at this college, but it's 50 students at this college? That's a big difference. And it's definitely something that you want to look at. Second, this is more of an inside baseball slide, Debbie, but I really wanted to show it because I'm fascinated. I take a lot of college tours, and I'm fascinated by the number of buildings that have been built on many campuses over the last 25 years. When I was taking tours 15 years ago, people loved to show off the greatest, latest building that they had. Basically, what this slide shows is there's way more space on most campuses than there are people. And so what does that mean? That means I think a lot of schools are going to struggle to fill their dorm rooms, to fill their classroom space. You're also going to see it in what I call, what is called deferred maintenance. And that is a big bill on many campuses. So as you're taking tours, you might start to see buildings that a lot of paint is chipping, things are not fixed, like minor things. You might also start to see major pieces. If you start to see major uh, things that, like in your own home, would cause you worry, literally the roof leaking, that says to me that this college, this is something Moody's and Fitch and the other S&P and the other ratings agencies really look at in terms of the financial health of a college. That means the college has not been putting enough money into deferred maintenance. Space growth, by the way, is overall. I see a question on that. That's both academic space as well as living space, student affairs space, so forth. But it means that that college has not been able to invest in deferred maintenance. That is a big red flag for me in terms of their financial viability going forward.
So a few people are asking about relative to space. What about there are, you see pictures, especially now as kids are moving in, some schools are overcrowded, particularly in their dorms.
Yes, they are, especially at the publics that have essentially over-enrolled. The other reason, though, that's happening, I've been actually trying to pursue this as a story. The number of requests for accommodations to have single rooms has skyrocketed in the last couple of years. So I was talking to a dean of residential affairs at a big public university, and they said now they have more requests for single rooms than they have single rooms. And so what ends up happening, and these are accommodation requests, so they have to fulfill them. What ends up happening is that they end up using double rooms as singles, which then pack in everybody else, triples into doubles, et cetera, et cetera. So, Debbie, I know that we have, you've seen a lot of questions. I know I took a lot longer than I expected, as you told me I would. I think we covered a lot of good topics there, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Yeah, there's definitely good questions. I just want to ask a few, I think, to give people some information, particularly those parents of rising seniors. And I know this information is in your book, but what's some of your best advice that you would give them who they're starting or maybe they shouldn't, some of them have started or some of them are about to start the college search process. And even a lot of the data that you went over today is good, but it can be overwhelming. Like, yep. How should people go about this? What are some of if you could give the top 3 to 5 things that they should be doing and types of questions they should be asking?
Well, the first thing to do, and again, I'm not trying to push this guide, but you really want to ask, what am I going to college for? What do I want to get out of the experience? I think the biggest mistake that most families make when they're starting the college search is they go right to the names of schools. They start to list, well, we're going to go see Syracuse, and we're going to go see Ohio State, and we're going to go see Michigan State, North Carolina State, or whatever it is. These are schools that have been in the ether. They know kids who've gone there. Maybe they went there. These are places that their high school goes to, their kids from their high school go to. Forget about the names for a minute. What you want to do is you want to do 2 things. You want to first make a list of what do you want out of college? That can include major, but that could also include, do I want small classes? Do I want big classes? Do I want to spend time with my professors? Do I want to participate in these activities? There's a lot of questions that you should be asking about the college experience. That's first. Second, you want to then get a sense of what is a liberal arts college? What is a big public research university? So here's an example. I live in Washington, D.C., although I didn't unfortunately get back there tonight. But within a couple of hours, even within a couple of minutes, I could take my kids, and we've done this because I have a rising sophomore. We ended up going to George Washington University for a program one night. And I asked my daughter, I said, well, what do you think of this? And she's like, oh, it's in a city, it's not a real campus, right? She got a feel for what an urban private university is like. My niece went to the University of Maryland. We've gone out to football games there. As we walk around campus, I ask her, what do you think of this place, right? Big public research university. We have friends, family who teach at F&M, Franklin and Marshall College up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, right? Like a small liberal arts college, right? Three examples, all within, not very far of my home. Most people have that. Not, you don't have everything, I know, where you might live, but that's the first thing I would do is doesn't mean you have to go to the University of Maryland or doesn't mean you have to go to George Washington, but you start to get a feel for what those campuses are like. And I understand there are differences between them, but I've been on a lot of campuses in my life. If you've been on one big public research campus, you've been on a lot of public research campuses. They're different, but they're not that different. And it gives you a feel for what you want. So that's what I would do first, Debbie, before you start making the list. Second, as you make your list, the biggest mistake that I see people make is they stretch. They stretch for these reach schools that are truly reach schools. The more honest you are up front
So
about
they're stretching academically.
academically, but even financially,
Okay.
right? I think they stretch financially. I think that most people, this is the one thing I love about your community, is that people get in there and they're very
Webinar,
honest.
my main guy,
Oops,
Jeff
sorry.
Selingo, what's up?
Um, you you have to have this conversation early on about a budget, what you're willing to pay, what you can pay. Have that conversation with your kids. I've seen this way too often, Debbie, where people just say, well, it is a black box to understand what college will actually cost you until after you get in. I get that. But most parents will say, well, let's just apply and we'll figure it out later. Well, when you do that, you end up stretching yourself in a way often to make something work rather than decide up front, both academically and financially, what's a right fit.
Can you talk a little bit? I know that you talk about this in the book, but what the idea of what is value to you and the pressure, that people have between going and looking for schools that have value versus the prestige.
Yeah. No, and I do. And increasingly, I think people are picking value over prestige. Value to me is what is the money you're putting in for the value you're getting out, for the money you're getting out. So we've done an analysis in this new book around a price to earnings ratio, essentially, right? What are you paying? What's the net price you're paying? And what is the average earnings of that college or university? And the reason why this is important, Debbie, is because in most cases, the difference, and I have data from David Deming, who has looked at decades of earnings data from the IRS, and what he's found is that for graduates of the Ivy League, for example, do they make more money than the graduates of everyone else? At the very top, they do. No doubt about it. If you graduate and you're at the top of your earnings in your career, in your career, you're going to out earn the person at the top of their earnings from almost every other college at highly selective colleges. But what he points out is that we tend to over index on the outliers, meaning we tend to think, oh, it's those people who've gone to Harvard and have done very well, right? Everybody does well who goes to Harvard. And that's not true. What he's shown is on the average, when you look at average earnings over time, that the students who go to Harvard, no different than the students who go to Ohio State, UCLA, University of Florida, Clemson, most places. So he unfortunately he only looked at a group of schools, so he didn't look at every school. But again, average, pretty similar. I would even encourage people to go to the college scorecard, U.S. government college scorecard. And if you know your kid wants to major in X, whatever that might be, especially, by the way, this is very true of STEM majors. Look up STEM majors, look up electrical engineering or look up computer science. You're going to see a lot of overlap between the highly selective schools and the less selective schools on outcomes, on earnings outcomes. In fact, they're going to be a couple $1,000s difference between them. And so what I want to ask parents, is it worth paying 10, 20 more $1,000 a year so that your kid can make one or two more $1,000 a year after college. That to me is that value over prestige thing that we're talking about.
And I guess, and these are also questions that parents could and should be asking on tours, going, getting a better understanding from the career services. Um,
And there's one more value, Debbie. I'm going to throw one more thing out because I think to me it is the key finding in the book. When people say, "Well, what is the most surprising finding in the book?" and it's this: most parents want their kids to go and be engaged in college. They want them to go to classes. They want them to find professors who are going to just light that fire under them, right? They're going to want peers that push them. They want to be engaged in campus life. So this idea of student engagement, most parents want that. There is a survey that's done every year at 900 colleges, has been done for 25 years, called the National Survey of Student Engagement, measures tons of things around student engagement. And
Whoops,
sorry, I don't know what that was, but
I don't know.
um,
Somebody has shared their screen by
oh,
accident.
um,
Okay.
so uh, anyway, so engagement. And so what I did is the National Survey of Student Engagement. You can ask, by the way, a college that you're going to, have you participated in this survey? They survey all freshmen and seniors at 900 plus colleges. Have you participated in it, and do you share your results? Most colleges don't share their results, and these are not shared publicly. But here's the point of what I put in the book. I approached NSSE, that's what it's called, National Survey of Student Engagement, and I asked them, hey, would you give me your results? I knew the answer would be no. But I said, can you give me the results by selectivity? So can you
Mm.
show me how much more, because we, I think, tend to think this, how much more are kids engaged at the most selective colleges versus the least selective colleges? So I sent them a whole data set by selectivity, and the findings were fascinating. First of all, the overall satisfaction with colleges pretty similar between the most selective, the next selective group of selectivity, next group, all the way down to the bottom. Faculty student engagement, by the way, like how often do you talk to faculty members? Much higher at less selective colleges than more selective colleges, which I could have, by the way, predicted, right? Most professors who work at highly selective colleges, they don't really care about undergraduates for the most part. I know that's a big, wide statement, and I'm probably going to get criticized in the chat for that, but it's true. They don't. And so there's all these assumptions, there's all these myths that we think that I really want people to think more broadly about.
So I'm going to switch for a second because there was this one question, and this is just honestly current news.
Yeah.
Somebody wanted your opinion about the lawsuit that has been brought
Oh,
about
early
for,
decision.
yes.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a really hard lawsuit to prove uh, that that there's that prices are higher, that there's price fixing, that there's collusion. Um, I think that most colleges share some information, but they don't share a lot of information. I would be surprised if it were successful, but we'll see.
Um, and there's another question, and we've actually started to explore this about, do you think colleges will, some will maybe offer 3-year programs, or is there a way of reducing the amount of time that a student needs to be in
Well,
college?
I think there are two big trends happening. First of all, the 3-year degree is a thing. It is starting to take off. And 3-year degrees, normally what has happened in the past is that they would squish 120 credits equals a bachelor's degree. They would usually squish 120 credits into 3 years, and they would call it a 3-year degree. But a number of institutions have gotten accreditation for a true 3-year degree that are 90 credits. It's less than that. And I think you're going to start to see more colleges offer that. Whether people will take it, I don't know. But the bigger trend, Debbie, is dual enrollment.
Mm.
Dual enrollment is taken off in many states. There's probably a lot of people on here tonight where their kids might graduate with something almost equal to a 2-year degree, an associate's degree, bringing all those credits into colleges. Now, we know the dirty little secret in higher ed is that most of those colleges are not, most of those credits are not accepted by a lot of places, or at least they're not accepted for your major, right? They might count towards your minor, or they might count towards electives and things like that. So you might save some money, but you don't save 2 years of money, for example. I do think there's going to be a lot of pressure, both from the federal government and states, but increasingly the market, where parents are going to say, wait a second, they're going to say to their state legislators and others, wait a second, we just took all these courses in high school. We were told that it was going to help us in college. And now these colleges, these state colleges in your own state, are not taking these credits.
Right.
So I think there's going to be a lot more pressure to take those. I think that will end up reducing college costs.
Oh, and kind of in the same vein, what about the community college route to college, the articulation agreements? In some places, they're
very good.
They're very good. I mean, honestly,
good.
Near me, you can go to the community college for 2 years and transfer into Villanova. You could do the same thing and transfer into Drexel. And so, that's significant.
I highly recommend that if there's a great pathway. The problem is, I think you're pushing against, on all these things, right? You're pushing against culture. The culture that has told us the college experience in the United States is a 4-year residential full-time experience, football, Greek life, parties, all that stuff. That's expensive.
I was going to say, it's just coming at too high a price these days.
It's just coming at too high of a price. And I think until we all start to put down our arms and we say, we're not going to do it anymore, we're not going to pay for this anymore, I think the experience will change. I think there's room in the market for a college to say, we're going to offer something really good without all these frills. The question is, will people buy it?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So there's a question here, and we didn't really touch on this, but again, it's in the book, to talk about a college's financial stability. Like, how can parents research that? What should they be aware of?
Well, again, as you know, Debbie, whole chapter in the new book on this. But here are a couple of clues. Well, first of all, I'm a big fan of the ratings. Now, not every college is rated, and it's hard to sometimes get access to the full ratings, but look up Fitch, look up Standard & Poor's, S&P, and look up Moody's. And again, not every college is rated, but you can at least get some clues about them. Look up their endowment per student, I think, is really important. I don't think it's something that you make a choice about, but if you have 5 colleges left on your list, sort them by total endowment by student. And that may be something, this one college has so much more money that's going to provide them a cushion that they don't otherwise have. You can look up, now if you're a little bit of an accountant, you can look up their audited financial statements. Now, you're not going to be a forensic accountant and start like adding up the numbers. But one thing you can do is there's a lot of notes in those that tell you, like, give you red flags. And then finally, one suggestion I should have actually said earlier on a number of things: read the student newspaper. There are a lot of things in the student newspaper that you may not know about that are happening on campus.
Well, I guess in the similar line of questioning, somebody's asking, how many small liberal arts schools do you think, or small liberal arts colleges do you think will close in the next few years?
It's very hard to close a college, but I do think they will increase. I think really what's going to happen, and I mentioned this in the book, I think more are just going to limp along. That's what I worry about more. If I'm a parent or student, I wouldn't really worry too much about, am I picking a college that's going to go out of business? They may. More so, are they going to have the money to invest in my kid? Are they going to have the money to invest in good career services, good student services, student success, all those things? Because more what I think is going to happen, sometimes when I walk into a mall, you probably have seen this when you walk into mall these days, right? There's like 4 stores left open and the rest of it's kind of like not great, right? The food court is closed and things like that. I think we're going to start to see a lot more of that, where you're going to see colleges kind of limping along. They haven't closed fully, but they're not really, they're not really the full, they're not the place that you thought you were paying for.
Or do you think also that some colleges will start to merge? Like
I think they will start to merge. It's very hard to merge colleges, just like it's hard to close colleges. again, I think the biggest bucket going forward are these colleges that are barely going to survive. And I'm
Mm.
not quite sure I want to be a student at one of those because I think you're not going to have a great experience.
Um, just seeing what else we might not have. Uh,
These are great questions, by the way.
yeah. What about co-op programs, like internship programs that the colleges have, put together? Those were kind of important and hot,
Yeah.
but you know,
They're actually more important than anything.
right.
The number one, what we saw in the book is that getting hired after college incredibly tied to having an internship or co-op experience. Your chances of being underemployed much higher if you have a co-op or internship experience. Now, not every college can offer it guaranteed, but what you want to ask is how much help do you give me in getting something like that?
And it definitely varies from school to school.
It varies from school to school, and so it's a question that you should ask. Ask current students, ask recent graduates, ask faculty members, ask the career services. Where have don't just ask about where people have gone on to get jobs, but where have they gone to get internships? How have they gotten those internships?
So there's been a ton of great information tonight. I think you even mentioned this in the book that, for some parents, this can become like a full-time job in a way, kind of doing all this research. So like what's the balance, that people should approach between getting crazy about, all the data that they could put together, all the questions they should ask, all the visits that they should make versus but it's hard because this is
It's
an
hard. And as I say in the book, there's no easy button. I have suggested a lot of stuff here, right? And you could really drive yourself crazy. You could make it a full-time job. As I say in the book, if you want to get in shape, you're going to go to the gym. Now, if you went to the gym 7 days a week, you're probably going to get in great shape and get in shape pretty quickly. But there is something about even going 1 or 2 days a week just to get yourself healthier, right? So there is even a little bit of moderation in this, moderate work in this college search can pay off a lot. Um, it is work though, and give yourself the other thing I think you can do. And again, I don't know, maybe there's some parents on here tonight who are parents of sophomores or juniors. The more time you give yourself, Debbie, the better off that you're going to be. I think many people end up rushing this process, and I get it. Again, it's a lot of work, but the more time you have, the less overwhelmed I think you'll be.
that's one thing that Jeff and I have talked about because you had actual data in your book. I've just seen it so often that, it's more than anecdotal, but I didn't actually have the numbers behind it. That sometimes we see too many families really start this search process for a rising senior in August.
Yes.
Not that that's completely late, but if you can see all of the research and all of the data that would really help you make a good decision, you can understand that, it's kind of rushing it starting in August. And I guess
And there's research, I have academic research in the book that shows when we make decisions over a longer period of time, we make better decisions. And so again, I think time is of the essence here. And again, you don't need to spend every day on it for 3 or 4 years, but if you start slow and then obviously do more as you get to be your senior year, you're going to have a better process.
Okay, one last question. I see somebody's asking, what's the most important thing you think families of rising seniors who want to chase merit should be doing now?
Well, I think you should be looking at the list you have put together, Debbie, the work that you do, the work that I do with my buyers and sellers list. You really want to be looking for schools that have been generous with merit aid. You want to make sure that they're on your list. This is the thing that I find surprising when I talk to parents that they just kind of package all schools together. They think all schools are the same when it comes to financial aid, and they're not. Some schools are very generous with merit aid. Other schools are incredibly stingy with merit aid. So the more that you know that you have schools on your list that are a good academic fit, a good social fit, but also they're pretty generous with merit aid. As long as you have a few of those schools on your list, I think you'll end up with a decision set at the end that is good academically, but also good financially.
Right. And, just kind of learning about this and doing a little bit of research, a lot of this information you can know ahead of time. I always tell families, you can honestly, on some level, predict what your cost is going to be, predict if your student will get merit aid before your student even sends in and presses submit on that application. And that's kind of the type of research, among all the other questions that you've given people to ask, that families should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think I'm surprised when I talk to some families that they don't understand kind of how merit aid works. I highly recommend, Paying for College 101. I highly recommend Ron Lieber's book and his work. Uh, you know, just you don't have to know all the nuances of it, but if you understand basically how college is awarded, I think you will end up with a decent amount of money at the end that can be very helpful to paying for college.
Okay. Well, this was great, Jeff. I thank you for your time tonight. I thank you for all of your rigmarole, making sure that you could be here with your travel issues. And I highly encourage everybody to pre-order the book, both, to support Jeff, but also for your own good knowledge. I mean, it will be like a basic that you'll go back to over and over again, particularly if you're a family with going through the college process or having to go through the college process in the next few years. So thank you, Jeff, for your time tonight.
Well, Debbie, it was great. Again, love your community, love what you have done in building this community. Thank you all, for everyone out there, not only for your support, but for your knowledge. I learned so much from families. I mean, there's a lot I think I bring to this, but I am learning constantly
I have
every
to echo
day
that. I
from the
learn
stories.
every day from what
Yeah,
people
I
share.
learn every day. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't really think of it that way, right? The
Yeah.
question, I think, it's hard when you're deep in this every day. Sometimes you kind of lose the forest for the trees, and I sometimes remember, oh, that's a great question. I didn't think of it that way. Or people are giving me knowledge about the practices schools are using that sometimes I call out about, right? So the Syracuse story is a great example of this. I first discovered it in somebody posting about it and Paying for
Yep.
College 101. It turned into a story. Ron did the same story, right? Like we find out things and call out what I think sometimes are not great practices by colleges and universities, or sometimes they're good and more people should know about them. So,
Yep, absolutely. Or even just to learn people's concerns, you know
yep.
what I mean? So
Well, thank you so much and good night, everybody.
good night.